Hey everybody, welcome. This week will be a pre-recorded session. It's a new one, but it's pre-recorded because I might not be available this Sunday, but I should be back next. Anyway, what I want to continue on is we started last week looking into how to relax into the world of farm, and I want to continue with that this week. So a quick review of last week was that we looked at the difference between the world we created and the world created by God, and we looked deeply into the reality of God's creation of the world and how that's a real thing. We considered the difference between the body of creation itself and the forms it takes at diverse times. We also looked at how to define absolute reality compared to relative or time-based reality. We examined and looked at the substance of the body apart from the form it takes as a body of suchness or isness. We also considered and looked at the worldviews, that we see the world God created it. When we see these worldviews are out there, as a world God created is doomed, and when somebody holds that worldview that this world God created is doomed, how that belief in that belief fosters the desire to escape from that world. So we considered how when we being love ourselves, disembody ourselves from the world, that what we inherit or what's left to us is a cold, dead world. We considered the need to be in the world as a loving presence, or as Jesus said, the light of the world and the salt of the earth. Right? We looked at the only escape that's really possible is to escape back into the present moment, into this reality, rather than someplace that's not real. We also looked at our need to detach ourselves from the notions of what is impermanent, that should remain permanent. Detach ourselves from that notion and to be with the impermanence here in a way that the shore is to the river, that it's there but it's not being carried away by it, right? That flow of impermanence goes on, yet the shore remains steadfast, and we can be in the world of impermanence in that manner to where we can let life flow past us, around us, but yet be like the shore that all this flow happens in. We looked at how now, right now, is the time to come back to the now, right? Now is the time to come back to the now. And we considered the wisdom of sorting things out before a flood of adversity hits us. That comes in the flow of impermanence, so that we carry with us only what matters most rather than lingering in a place that is doomed to come apart. And that's whatever is impermanent. We looked at how the escapades to escape from this changing world into one that we can control and save, only distance us from enjoying real salvation. The compulsion to save the world is a source of great contention and suffering, especially in the times we're in. We also considered how the balance happens and justice comes about when we don't force things into conformity, but rather we allow things to find their place. The find their way back home to where they belong all on their own. So let's consider now the need for the journey of a prodigal son, okay? Let's consider the prodigal son, and let's look at the need for the journey of a prodigal to find his way back home rather than being forced back home in order that he can know his home is the real home. Or let's look at it like the prodigal. Remember the story of the prodigal. He left home to pursue the pleasures of the world, right? He got sick of it, came to his senses, and came back home, right? And his father, is, according to the story, welcomed him with like a gold ring and a party and a robe and all that. But the prodigal had to find his own way home. When he left, the father didn't go out looking for him and force him to come back home, right? The prodigal had to go out and find this out for himself. He had to go out and taste of the bitter fruit of the world system and the pursuits of those pleasures and see where they took him before he knew where his real home was and came back to his senses and came back home. So people do need to suffer until they don't need to suffer, right? They do need to suffer until they don't need to suffer. And the thing is with suffering, there's two kinds of suffering, although the nature of suffering remains the same. There's suffering that leads to more suffering, and there's suffering that leads to the liberation or freedom from it. And whenever we try to avoid the suffering, that always leads to more. But when we can embrace that suffering and really look at its nature and where it comes from, that suffering can actually be the doorway to realization, just like the prodigal woke up and found his way back home. That type of suffering can bring us back to the truth, to reality, to the light, right? So we need to allow people to suffer in order for them to discover for themselves what the truth is. And we can't discover the truth for them, right? We can't do it for them. And we can't make them see. We can't make them see. We can only clear the way that hinders us from seeing and make space for the seeing to occur. Insisting that others share our views and beliefs is folly, and it only robs us of our peace. It leads into a flood of frustration when we insist that others see things the way we do, right? In trying to do what can't be done, because seeing for others rather than letting them see, it just doesn't work. It's not possible. I have to see for myself. You have to see for yourself, right? And if I try to insist you see as I see, it's only going to leave me frustrated. So we have to allow others to see for themselves. We have to allow others to have minds of their own. In order to relax into this world of form, we must see how our opinions and our views are only forms of beliefs, right, that we have, that are bound to change in time, because they're not truths. They're impermanent. All our opinions and forms of beliefs are not truths, because even our beliefs change, our minds change. They're bound to change. It's the nature of it. So rather than correcting others about their views and their opinions and their beliefs, it's a much wiser thing and a much more skillful thing to give them space to just be, to just let them have their views, to just let them have a mind of their own, rather than giving your opinion or input, right? Listening to them rather than giving your opinion or input. Because, see, we don't understand how things work out when people think for themselves until we resist the compulsion to interject our advice or opinion. And when we can simply let things be rather than injecting our advice or opinion, we can let things work out for themselves. Then we can begin to see how they do, and we can begin to have faith that we don't have to interject our advice or opinion in all these circumstances and force people to see things our way. So practice silence and listening. That's something we should practice. Listen to how we're listening. If inside we're planning a response before we hear somebody out completely, that's folly. That's not good. Jesus said to his disciples, he said, "He who has an ear to hear, let them hear." Or in other words, he who has a heart to hear, listen to this. He who has an ear to hear, let them hear. He who has a heart to hear, listen to this. He didn't force his words on hearts that were not ready to hear. He said, let them hear. It's a matter of allowing hearing rather than forcing hearing to occur, right? So Jesus never forced eyes to open or ears to hear. He simply gave them space to do so. He healed not by effort, but by letting the seeing and hearing take place. His presence provided an atmosphere and an environment for that to occur. The way he healed and opened blind eyes and deaf ears was not by force. He merely provided the presence or the environment for the healing to manifest itself. And if we provide that kind of environment and presence, then healing will happen. The conditions for healing will be there and healing will happen. So the seeds of healing are in everything, right? And we must simply give them ground to grow in. We need only to examine the compensatory mechanisms of the body and how that what we call anamoses form around blocked arteries, which are basically new arteries, right? To supply the blood flow when an artery becomes blocked. The body has what they call compensatory mechanisms and will actually make new ones to compensate for the old ones. So the seeds of healing are within the body. They're innate within all of creation. The seeds of healing are innate. They're within all of creation. It's the nature of things to come back to their nature if we simply don't interfere. It's the nature of things to come back to their nature. We simply don't interfere. We simply make the environment for that to happen. It does happen. So when considering this, enlightenment or coming to our senses is not a matter of pushing and pulling or turning a deaf ear. It's coming to is the way of not pushing and pulling, but a way of letting come, of having a heart that's approachable. When the heart's approachable, then awakening comes to it, right? When the heart is approachable, then awakening comes to it. So enlightenment is not a matter of effort as it is a matter of dropping the defenses. Enlightenment is not a matter of effort as much as it's a matter of dropping the defenses. Becoming vulnerable to awakening, to enlightenment, is part of the process. So rather than hiding our head under our covers like a frightened child when we encounter things that scare us, the way a kid does when he has a nightmare and holds the cover over his head, just don't look, you see, that it takes faith or trust to become vulnerable so that we are approachable, so that the truth can come to us. So because of that, this vulnerability that comes along with the faith. See, we're not going to become vulnerable unless we can trust, right? Trust and vulnerability, they come they come in and they flow together, right? So this faith and this vulnerability is a precursor to enlightenment. You have to have it there for enlightenment. You have to be approachable for the experience of awakening to come to you. So, like Jesus once said, he said to Thomas, "You've seen because you believe because you've seen." Is what he told Thomas. Remember when he put his fingers in his hands and that whole story. He goes to Thomas. He goes, "You believe because you've seen, but blessed are those who have believed and haven't seen." So the thing is, see here, that faith opens up ourselves to being vulnerable and becoming enlightened. And we don't believe because we see. We see because we believe. Let me say that again. We don't believe because we see. We see because we believe. Just take a second and just mull that over just a minute. We don't believe because we see. We see because we believe. That's something to sit around and really contemplate. Because only with trust will enlightenment come. The Bible said, by faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the Word of God. So this understanding comes along with the faith, right, with the trust. You first have to have the trust there for the comprehension and the understanding of what that brings with it to come to you. So what happens when we forsake our faith? When we forsake our faith, we cut ourselves off from the light, right? And why do I say forsake our faith? I say forsake our faith because it's not like you haven't been given any faith. Jesus said that every man is given a measure of it. Every man is given a measure of faith, right? So you're given all the faith you need and able to see and able to hear. You're given all the faith you need to see and hear. But if you forsake that faith, if you forsake that trust, then you go blind, right? So when we forsake faith, what happens is we end up taking matters into our own hands. We exert our own power, our own will over things. And then we become, then what happens is we start to get choked or crowded out with the cares of this life because we're taking care, we're trying to control. Jesus spoke about this in the parable of the seed and the sower. He said this, and he was talking about the seeds and the sower, and he said, disciple, these are those which are sown among thorns, right? When the sower, he said, such as hear the word and the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches and the lust of other things entering in, choke the word and it becomes unfruitful. So as soon as we feel that we have to take matters into our own hands and hold on to these things, right? Um, Insisting that we have to provide for ourselves rather than trusting in the benevolence of a friendly universe of a non-malevolent God. As soon as we do that, then we begin to make decisions about what we need, right? We decide what we need, and we end up chasing those things out of a sense of lack, rather than knowing the fullness of life that's in the moment. And in this pursuit, in this chase, we fall into a dream state, a state of darkness, a state of illusion, into a dream world that we ourselves have fabricated. And that dream world is kind of like the story of Rip Van Winkle. Rip Van Winkle, maybe you heard that story where you were a kid, where he went out in the woods to escape and get away from his nagging wife, and he fell asleep, and then he woke up years later, and he was asleep for all them years, and then he found that the world had completely changed, that his kids had grown up, his wife died, all his friends were different or gone, because he slept through that whole time. But see, that's what happens is when we get caught in these pursuits, we fall into a dream world, a state of sleep. When we get caught up in these pursuits and these cares of this life, we fall into this dream world, this sleep, and life goes on even though we're sleeping, right? Life goes on even though we're unconscious of it. Our kids grow up. The things happen all around us. But our pursuits keep us blind to all those things that are going on around us. And we enter into this like comatose state. The world changes, though. Impermanence does its work even though we lose consciousness of it. And then when we do finally wake up, we find the world is a strange world to us, an alien world. And it's quite shocking to us when we do finally wake up, because when we're finally enlightened and the light finally comes on, that's what happens, is we find that life went on without us. That all this time life was going on and we were missing it because of our unconsciousness, right? So it's not easy to become enlightened. We're kind of left in a disillusioned state. We're kind of left looking around like, what happened? But that's okay. It's good that happens, because that means we're awakening. The part of this process of awakening is the realization that we've been sleeping all of our years, and rather than living and being present, right? So we find ourselves in a world that we're not accustomed to when we finally do awaken. We find ourselves surprised by how we just don't know how to function in this world that we slept through rather than grew along with, right? It's not pleasant to wake up in a house and find that it's on fire. Yet we're still better off for the awakening, right? For the awakening, rather than sleep while the fire consumes our very being. So, yet we tend to want to sleep as a way to escape that fire. Yet when that happens, sometimes God kind of bitch slaps us in His benevolence like he did Saul on the road to Damascus, right? We kind of get hit with the blinding light that awakens us up rudely from our sleep, and rudely, right? Um, because when you're sleeping, the world of form, it changes all around you, but you're not aware of it, right? You don't know it, and you get carried away by the incessant thought streams of your mind. You become insensitive to the world that's here right now. You miss the smell of the crisp morning air. You don't feel the warmth of the sun on your skin. You don't see the dew glistening on the grass like a sea of diamonds. The birds are singing like a choir each morning, like heavenly angels, but that all falls on deaf ears because you're caught up in your head, right? Concerning yourself with a different world, a world that's not real, convinced that a better world lies someplace else. You miss the one that's here now. And what happens is while you're missing the world that's here now, as your children grow, and you miss that. While you're missing an action, your children grow. While you're missing an action, trying to make a better living for them, you don't live with them, right? While you're trying to make a better living for them, you're missing an action and you don't live with them. Because you're living for them. You miss the train in trying to make arrangements to board it. You miss the train in trying to make arrangements to board it. So consider that now, how that one type of love, right? There's a type of love that allows you to live with what's here, as it is in the moment. And another love demands that you live for what's here. One type of love allows you to live with what's here, and another type of love demands that you live for what's here. One more time. One type of love allows you to live with what's here, what's here. And another type of love demands that you live for what's here. See, one love is the way, and another love carries you away. One love is the way that keeps you here. Another love is the way that carries you away from here. Yet there is a way of being with living alongside with what's here without living for it, right? There's a way of being that allows us to live alongside what's here without living for it. As the old adage goes, of eating to live rather than living to eat, right? So consider this. Consider what happens to your life when what you live for is gone. What happens then when what you live for is gone? When what you live for is taken, when the far is taken away from the living, what happens then? What happens when you have nothing to live for? What happens when you have nothing to live for? Remember, we were talking about living with rather than for. If you need a purpose to live, you live conditionally. You love conditionally. If you live for. And in a world of changing conditions, in a world of impermanence, people that live for things rather than with them are doomed to suffer disappointment. Yet, if we are willing to live in the love without the conditions, then we find the eternal life, the eternal love. And only then can we become that embodied presence. where we're comfortable in our own skin and where we can simply relax into the world of form and be at ease in this world of change, right? Remember what the serenity prayer goes. It said, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? So this is all about knowing what is possible to change and what can't be changed. Knowing what's possible to change and what cannot be changed. And what does not change is the fact that everything changes. What does not change is the fact that everything changes. You can't change the fact that everything changes. So if we're going to come to acceptance, we must first be willing to let things change. Because it's their nature to change, right? Because it's their nature to change, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with change happening, right? Life on its terms. Impermanence is actually what makes us alive. It's the nature of living things to grow and change. Not simply physical bodies, but also attitudes and beliefs and desires. Those things also change as we mature. And if there's no change in them, there's no change in our attitudes and beliefs and desires, then we're not really maturing. There's no maturity going on when we're not changing. So the resistance to change keeps us from maturing. It leads to closed-mindedness. It leads to hard-heartedness. Resistance, resistance to change leads to laying burdens of being in the form of expectations on ourselves and our brothers. Resistance to change leads to laying burdens of being in the form of expectation on ourselves and our brothers. So one of the things that hinders us and fosters this resistance to change is this notion or belief that we equate change with loss, right? We equate change, when things change, we're going to lose something. Yet what we fail to see is that in confinement, there is limited space to be, right? And to escape being confined, we must be willing to suffer loss and to suffer change. So he that is willing to change is liberated from confinement. The man in prison, for example, there may be a man in prison for civil disobedience who has had a change of heart while in his cell. And in his cell, he has become a new man. Old man isn't there any longer. He's escaped the confinement by his change of heart. He becomes free of this weight of guilt that he had when he entered his cell. But for the defiant one, for the one who defies change, no one needs to imprison that man, for he's already imprisoned himself by his insistence that the world take his form, keep his laws, turn his way. Consider what the world would be like if nothing changed. Have you ever met someone who professes certitude, that knows it all? The drunk on the bar stool, who has life all figured out, who has all the solutions to all the world's problems? How vivacious and full of life is such a man? Stuck in his mental obsession, he never sees any new solution to the same old world. Stuck in his mental obsession, he never sees any new solution to the same old world. He's convinced that if others would hold his views, the world would be a much better place. And what he's blind to is that he sees the world as a bad place that needs to get better. And he supposes if everyone holds to his views, society would be better for it. Yet his view of the world is dark. He sees it as a bad place, and the darkness is all that he can really contribute by his view. Let me say that once more. This guy's convinced that if everybody would hold his views, the world would be a better place. And what he's blind to, is that he's seeing the world as a bad place that needs to get better. He sees the world as a dark place, right? That's his view. It's a dark view. And he supposes if everyone holds to his views, which are dark, society at large would be a better place for it. But yet his world view is dark, and the darkness is all that he can contribute by that view that he thinks will make the world a better place. So holding on to our views only brings darkness. For the world is around us is always changing, right? It's not the same old world. And if our view of the world does not change, how could we possibly be in touch with the world that's really here, that's really changing? So in a state of mind of unchanging views, what we make people absolutely bad or good. We say they're absolutely bad or good. We say, they always act this way. They never do this, right? And we heap condemnation upon the world when we hold to our views, when we hold to our guns. Then the world tends to be really sucky to us. It turns to be a living hell for us. Now, hell is said to be a place of what? Eternal torment, a place of despair and no hope, a place where nothing changes. And how often we make the world into that. We make the world into a living hell. This place of despair, this hopeless place where nothing changes. We say they always do this. They never do that. There's no hope there. There's no compensity or capacity for change to occur in that view. So it's by our resistance to change that we make the world into a living hell, right? It's by our insistence that the world conform to our beliefs and to our notions and to our opinions and to our desires and such the like that it makes the world a living hell. Because you see, the transformation that love brings with it entails change. And with impermanence, we have hope. Things can change. They can change for the good. Conformation that the world demands robs us of hope. Yet true resurrection is life beginning afresh, right? The world we have made for ourselves, the world that we've made for ourselves, that resurrection is returning to the past. We want to go back to the good old days, right? We see something wrong with these days. The world sees death as something in front of them. The world system, right? That world that we make. That body of pain, that egoic way of thinking sees death as something that's before them, that's in front of them. And they're always trying to bring it up to the rear. They're always trying to catch up and beat it, right? They're always doing something to keep that death in front of them so that they don't have to encounter it. They're always trying to keep it ahead of them where they don't meet with it, right? But the way of life is not to keep the death in front of us, it's to put it behind us. The way of life is to put the death behind us. And when the death is behind us, when it's behind us, all we have to look forward to is life. Do you see that? Do you see that? Let me say that. Say that once more. The way the world sees death is it's something in front of them. Something in front of them. They're always trying to bring up the rear, catch up to where it stays in front of them, right? They're always trying to get the past to come forward and push the deaths further away. Okay, but in doing so, they're always keeping death in front of them. It's what they have to look forward to. But the way of life is to go ahead and die and put the death behind you, right? And when the death is behind you, all that you've got to look forward to is the living, right? When you give up trying to solidify and force the world into conformity, and let go of your belief that these are bad times and there were better times before. When you give up the belief that there's something in front of you that's malevolent, right? Then you begin to live. Then you begin to live. Then you begin to live. And when we only have life to look forward to, not as a hope of things to come, but a scene from being in it. It's not so much a looking forward to what we don't already have. When we're fully alive, what more is there to gain? Isn't the fullness of life gain enough in and of itself? The fullness of life that's here right now is complete now. Now is the only time it can be complete, because now is all there is. And when we become conscious of the fullness of the life that's here right now, then we become content. Then we can relax into the world of form. Then we can let everything take form around us without feeling confined by it. And then the form around us becomes a form that's soft, permeable, not permanent, not hard, not cold. Namaste, thank you. Be well, my friends.